Hello and welcome to another edition of The Living Room, brought to you by Curzon Home Cinema. If you're watching this live, as is always the case, you can send in your question, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Just presage the question that you want to ask us with hashtag Curzon Living Room, and also let us know what part of the country or which country you're writing from. I'm delighted to welcome today the two directors of CAMINO SKIES, Fergus Grady and Noel Smyth. Hi, guys.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Ian. How's it going?
Evening.
Very well. How are you both? Sending your questions
Good.
here on YouTube.
It's nice and early.
You're, it's something like 5:30 in the morning with both of you in Australia.
Indeed. Nice and early here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Let's start with a simple question. Why the Camino de Santiago? Perhaps Noel.
I first heard about the Camino 10 years or so ago, and my wife walked it then when she was struggling with a lot of things in her life, and although I didn't know her at that time, since we've known each other, she's told me about this incredible experience she had on the Camino, and so it was. I knew of the Camino, but I didn't start researching the Camino until Fergus brought it up one day, and you know, he came across it and mentioned, what do you think about doing a film on the Camino? And we started looking into it, and the more we researched it, just the better it sounded. You know, we were so interested in what draws people to do it, hundreds of thousands of people every year, what draws them to do it, and then what keeps them coming back to do it, because so many people, you know, they'll do it once and then they get sort of hooked on the experience, and then they do it again and again. And so it really started just trying to find an answer to that question. So
did either of you actually do the walk before you made the film?
No, we you know, this was all a self-funded thing, so we would have loved to have done it and done a bit of a recce and do some research on it, but it was all self-funded, so we knew that we had to keep costs down, and we knew that with our sort of different skill sets we could do that, and we could just go and make a film. We didn't know if the film would be any good or not, but we knew we could at least go out and get it. So that's what we did. We kind of booked a chunk of time and booked some flights and found some characters and went out there and shot it.
Actually, it's the characters I'd like to talk about next. Perhaps Fergus, you can come in on this. Yeah, I thought perhaps you'd actually looked for people in advance, but it was literally that time you decided to go, and then you met people once you were there.
Actually, and we did find them while we're in New Zealand and Australia, but it just happened to be that they were all wanting to go at the same time, which was great. We'd known Claude and Sue from the Australian Camino community. They were quite active on the Facebook page, as well as Claude's self-published author. And then it was while I was in New Zealand on a work trip that I was able to connect with Terry. The day that I met Terry, we'd had Mark sign on the next day. He wanted to bring his son-in-law. And then we were very fortunate to find Julie through a travel agent. And then Cheryl was the last piece of the puzzle. So it was just perfect timing. We all left New Zealand and Australia in April 2 years ago now. Yeah, 2018.
I've got Terry Wilson asking a question. He's sent by YouTube, and he's actually asking about Terry.
You shouldn't take this question, Ian.
Okay, so this is the Terry Wilson. This is as he calls himself, the adorable older guy.
That's Terry.
Fine. Stop watching Terry, please. Okay, so I'm just curious now that so this was not a group that we're all traveling together, because at one point I thought they may have booked and traveled as one single group, but I wasn't sure where Claude came into the equation.
So we So we kind of basically, when we were looking for potential characters, we put it out. We put a newsletter out, in a travel newsletter, and basically told people that we would be walking the Camino, making a film on the Camino from this date to this date, and that if they were also walking the Camino and wanted to share their story, please get in touch. And so from that, and when we found all those subjects, we went away and we did walk it together with everyone, and so Claude was there with us as well. She lives in Brisbane, Australia, and and then as we'd kind of go along, we'd all stay together, but we'd choose one or two people to follow each different day.
It's interesting to know, because I just thought that you never know what you're missing, because obviously one of you is doing the sound and the other's filming. That's quite a challenge when you know people move at different paces, different rhythms, so no one's always going to be together. Who's the person you catch at which point during the day? Was it a case that you just decided that you wanted to even things out, or did you sort of take the temperature of the group in the morning and decide from there who you were going to go with?
I think, we wanted to see the different dynamics of the group, and there were obvious couples like Mark and Terry, who had a very similar pace. But then as we progressed through the sort of 800 kilometers, some people were struggling. Others had sort of hit their kind of peak through that sort of first week of building their leg strength. So it was just nice to see Sue being helped along by Claude, and then we see Julie really hitting her stride sort of halfway through. So it was just nice to mix up the group, and would have either 2 or 3 on camera every day, and then the next day would alternate with the other 2 or 3, and that's how we ran the kind of production schedule.
And we'd also usually kind of, depending on what was happening with people, or who was having a tough time, or who might, maybe we were doing a steep incline that day and sort of wanted to be with specific people, and so we'd figure it out usually the night before and make a decision. But going into it, the logistics, we spoke a lot about the logistics of shooting something like this with such a small crew. There were only 3 of us. It was a 1 camera shoot, and we were following 6 people. So we spoke a lot about logistics going into it and how we actually kind of cover that story. And at one point, we wondered whether we'd mic everyone up and just let the mics run and then kind of try and piece it all together. And then we thought, no, that'll be an absolute nightmare in the edit. And then so in the end, Fergus and I would sort of start the day filming 1 or 2 people together. And Fergus recorded audio, I shot it. But then eventually I would sort of fall behind as I was picking off different B-roll shots. And then I'd double time to catch up, but eventually I'd fall behind, and sort of Fergus would go off with whoever he was with and just record audio wilds. And I would either meet somebody behind me or just do my own thing and just film the rest of the day. And then we'd meet up wherever we were heading to that day. But it was a challenging shoot.
Was there ever a temptation to give camcorders to people, or if people had a camera with a camcorder facility, to record their own journey?
We did. I don't think we hadn't discussed camcorders for the whole thing, but we definitely discussed getting people to record like video diaries with either GoPros or even their phones or something. But yeah, I think in the end we sort of scrapped that idea just because we wanted a personal connection between the filmmakers and the subjects. And so I think we thought it was important that we were with our subjects at those points where things were happening. But yeah, who knows? It would have been really interesting to do that and to see what we would have gotten.
It's interesting what you say about building that relationship with the hikers themselves, because just thinking about the opening of the film, any film dealing with this trek, and I've seen one or two documentaries before, and there's the Emilio Estevez film, The Way, and Louis Buñuel's The Milky Way. It's always this emphasis on, look how beautiful this is. And we open this film with Sue in a pretty poor state after a really long walk of a day. And what I liked about that is that it immediately set up the idea that this film is not about this beautiful walk, that you're going to get incredible shots dominating. It is actually about the people doing the walk. I was just wondering about the conversations you had as you entered the editing suite of, did you know from the outset that's exactly what you're going to be doing and that's why you have that opening? Or was it something that you were playing around with during the edit?
It definitely wasn't a paid tourism ad from the Spanish government. I mean, we financed this ourselves to the point where we were in the final throes of editing. So when we brought our editor Ramon Watkins, who's an Australian editor, on, we really gave him carte blanche in terms of the linear or the non-linear form that the structure of the edit would take. So Ramon quickly identified the sort of 6 strongest emotional scenes, and then we sort of structured our film around those scenes, and then that's how we started with Sue. I guess, you know, we would have liked to have had better weather. We started in April. It's often just the start of the season. The Pyrenees, it's sort of slowly melting. So even on day one, we weren't able to cross the Napoleon Pass. We had to be rerouted up the valley. And so a lot of those great scenes actually came from that rerouting through the valley, rather than going over that kind of spectacular pass on day one.
I've got a question here from Emma from Putney, who's via Raglan, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a really good surfing location in New Zealand.
Yep.
Just and dealing with the time of the year, did you actually choose a specific time of the year that you knew would be good for going on the trail? And also, is that the time of the year that you would recommend that she do it, or is there a better time?
I think our reasons for shooting at that time were, I think we were working back from a date that we wanted to have a final film ready, and we thought, okay, well, and also we didn't want to waste time. We thought, well, we both have a busy other kind of work lives outside of the film going on, and so we needed to just do something and wanted to get it done. The weather definitely wasn't ideal. You know, it looks great on camera. I loved it because it looks super dramatic, but you know, as far as walking it was very wet. But because you're off season, it's also a lot quieter at different points. I think if you wait another month, a month or two, you start getting into kind of peak season when the weather's great, but then you also have to deal with the path being a bit busier.
I've got also
late summer. Sorry, I was going to say late summer is probably when most people aim for, when the temperature is not in that kind of 40 degrees Celsius mark, and it's a bit quieter. So August, September is probably the best time for Emma.
And a question from Rob: how long did the actual shoot take, and did you find yourself doubling back at any point in time to get certain landscape shots?
We walked it over 38 days. All up, we shot it for 42 days, and that was because at the end I spent a few extra days in Santiago de Compostela gathering we wanted some sort of final shots of the city and the square, but no, we didn't backtrack anywhere as much as I would have loved to. We just didn't have that budget, really. We had to, and there was something beautiful and pure about that as well. It's like whatever the weather is, that's what you get, you know, and you just have to live with that.
I've got a question from Ben from London, and it's just sort of, you've answered a little bit. He's asking about the funding of the film. and the benefits of actually being completely self-funded and the freedoms of it. What did you feel was the biggest benefit of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the attractive things of going into this a bit naive or having complete control. We didn't have any stakeholders that we needed to submit, production schedules or get, cost reports signed off. So, Noel and I booked our flights. We had a bit of money left over for, daily expenses, but really, by the time we got to the edit, we were already kind of in a bit of debt. And we were just very fortunate that we were able to get the New Zealand Film Commission, the government film body, on board at that point at the final kind of editing hurdle. And that allowed us to go into post-production and bring on some of the best post-production sort of freelancers in New Zealand that are working for Peter Jackson and the other guys in New Zealand. So yeah, we're very independent, and then we were very fortunate to get both New Zealand Film Commission and then the Australian government helped us out as well at the end with our fees.
And just in terms of the challenges that you faced, what did you feel while you were filming was the biggest challenge?
I'd say definitely the biggest challenge, like there is a certain challenge in having debt there, but also it was very freeing being able to just go out and shoot something and not have to wait for, to jump through the funding body hoops. But I'd say the biggest challenge was trying to, as we discussed before, trying to follow 6 different stories and I feel like we built trust with everyone really early, much earlier than I was expecting. I didn't expect to get anything kind of usable until halfway through the shoot, but almost day 1 and day 2, everybody was really, really open and comfortable on camera, and this was we didn't really know, like we hadn't met people properly until the night before we started, and Fergus and I had just flew in. I was really jet lagged and totally out of it. And we had a quick dinner with everyone and said hello, and then went to bed and crashed out, and then woke up and just set off the next morning on day 1. But yeah, the challenge was definitely trying to follow so many stories.
And the thing is, as a viewer watching it for the first time and knowing nothing about it, what's extraordinary about these stories is just how emotionally engaged you become with them. Obviously, there's Julie. Did you kind of realize while you were making the film that there was a strong potential that she would sort of, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I felt that she was the heart of the film. Did you have this sense that things wouldn't necessarily revolve completely around her, but we find out 40 minutes in what else has happened in her life, and it's devastating. Did you sort of, while you were filming, get this sense?
Absolutely. There were, all through, we knew, and a lot of it depends on what we were there to capture as well. Like and what happened on the day, and just the times we were with Julie, just so much would happen that we'd be able to get on camera, and the same with Sue, so much would happen, and so we were able to explore some of those stories kind of much more than we were with some of the other characters who for whatever reasons we maybe just couldn't get as much. But yeah, really, I'd say pretty early on we had a strong sense of how those stories would go and how they would end up on screen.
And in terms of personalities as well, during the editing process, I think the good example is Claude. There's the scene with Claude and Mark where she's talking about the story of the saint, and he's sort of non-expressive with his sunglasses on, where one can imagine what might be going through his head. And then you cut to Claude talking to camera about the fact that she offers her opinion. It is interesting the way that you construct the characters or put the characters together in the editing. Were there any challenges that you had with that in trying to be fair with each person?
We screened the film at the sort of rough cut stage to the guys. There were a couple of guys who couldn't make it to Melbourne where we had our cast screening, and I guess Noel and I have been working hard with Ramon in the edit, not necessarily to please them, but to present them in the fairest light, and we had no control over whether they would like what they saw or how they were depicted. So that was a really interesting screening to have for the first time, and you know, straight away, as soon as the lights were turned on after the screening, everyone said, "That's brilliant, we love it." And so we got everyone's sign off. We didn't have to edit anything in the film. So I think everyone thought that the way that we portrayed them was fair. And it was quite hard to fill the 80 minutes equally with everyone's stories. But we felt that the payoffs and what we'd established in their character journey and arc was how we wanted to see their characters portrayed.
That must have been quite fascinating screening, because there must be so many different emotions going on. Sue's watching it, that sense of incredible achievement, likewise with Terry, but at the same time you've got Mark and Julie, who probably, that's a very painful moment in time for them, and it's now a record of how they were feeling at that moment.
Absolutely. I think even, you know, when we'd finished the film, Julie had to, before going to the film festival where it was premiering, she had to watch it through multiple times just to kind of not get comfortable, but just to prepare herself for that. Even though she'd seen it, she just had to watch it again and again. And it was a tough screening for a lot of them, I think, but thankfully everyone was happy. And, you know, we were, or I don't know about you, Fergus, but I was, I was so scared that everyone would say, you know, we hate it, you have to change it. And we were sitting in the screening, and I was just kind of kept side-eyeing everyone to see what their reactions were at different points and what they thought. And but yeah, thankfully they all loved it.
Fergus?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was, I mean, we'd spent quite a lot of time in the edit suite, and having 3 people in the edit suite is an interesting dynamic, kind of majority rules, and there were some good creative processes that came out of that. And Ramon had his ideas, I had my ideas, and Noel had his ideas. So to have that kind of final group kind of sign off in the edit suite, and then to take it to the wider group, I was nervous in terms of how much time we'd spent in the edit. But in saying that, I mean, it worked out. And then when we released the film in New Zealand, Australia, we were able to take Terry and Sue on the road with us and a few of the other guys, and just to have that immediate feedback from audiences to Sue and to Terry really was an amazing payoff for those guys. They were able to see in person how their journeys were kind of received. And
clearly Terry is now stalking you wherever you have a screening around the world. I've got another question here. This is from Joanna, who is writing from Wellington via Earl's Court. Sue is amazing. Were you ever worried about her health or well-being to the point where you felt that you should intervene?
Still are. We're still worried about her health and well-being. She's a little pocket rocket that doesn't say no. She's, you know, her issues with her feet are ongoing. She was just in surgery last week. So I think for Sue, it's a state of mind. It's she wants to seize the days, so to speak. And her time is, maybe for her, in her mind, her time is running. So we couldn't really say to Sue, hey, you have to stop, you know, your Camino's over. That was never going to be our decision. It was going to be hers. But yeah, I think I say in an off camera line, you know, it's hard watching you in pain, Sue. But she got there, and it was an amazing emotional welcome when she arrived into Santiago. Yeah.
Another question here from Dan in East Dulwich. Could you talk about the aerial shots and also working with the composer and what you wanted from the music in the film?
Yeah. First, for the aerials, I had a little drone with me. We had we didn't have a lot of equipment, but we had more than I would have liked to have walked with. And we had this little DJI Mavic Air drone, and we shot a fair bit of drone stuff, but in the edit we didn't want it to be a tourism film, so we didn't want to just chuck in drone shot after drone shot. I thought it had to be a really nice balance of being handheld with subjects and being in the moment, trying to get across the physicality of it, but then having those big sweeping drone shots to just allow people to take a breather and step back and kind of get their bearings, and before we jump back in with characters. And the music, we worked with a New Zealand composer, Tom McLeod, who just did an absolutely amazing job. You know, during the edit, we had a lot of temp music in there with plans to, you know, rescore the entire thing. Because of our budget and time constrictions towards the end, we didn't have the budget to rescore everything. But we were able to get Tom to kind of go through and, you know, together we worked out who needed a key theme almost, or what were the key themes of the film, and can we tie them in and try and write. Yeah, I think he did about 15 minutes of original work for the film under just a crazy deadline as well, because we had our US premiere lined up. And so I think he had 2 weeks to turn something around, and just did an incredible job, and did a lot of beautiful string work, which is sort of what we wanted to just tie some really nice strings through the film and elevate it.
We're going to wrap up in a moment, but I just wanted to end really thinking about the Camino de Santiago and what we told at the beginning, that people see this as not necessarily a religious pilgrimage, but perhaps a spiritual one. I'm just curious from both of you, the sort of high point of a thing that you've taken away from this entire journey and the making of the film with you. Perhaps Fergus, start with you.
I think it was quite hard to be present while we were walking and filming. I guess it was a job, but it was a fantastic holiday job. And in retrospect and looking back, I've only got incredible memories of camaraderie. We felt like we were one of the team on camera, and we got on really well with everyone, and still do as group chat that goes back and forth every day. But I think ultimately it was just Noel and I cementing that relationship and having that harmony and our working relationship, not only with sound and camera, but also producing and directing. We complement each other's skill sets. So, you know, to go through that journey as a filmmaking duo, and then now we're working on, you know, we've got 3 new films on our slate. So it's just continuing that, and that's the most rewarding thing for me.
No.
For me, it's sort of cemented the fact that I just want to be out following stories with the camera, and out in nature as well. I had a moment maybe a month or two after coming back from Spain, where I was, you know, at my computer, and I just had a moment, looked outside, and just wished I was back out in nature, and you know, I just cemented for me that I don't want to live my life at a computer. I want to be out talking to people and filming and walking in nature.
And are your next two projects going to be out in nature?
What? Yeah. Well, not both of them. One of them. One of them is on the sister pilgrimage to the Camino, a Japanese pilgrimage called the Camino. So we're doing sort of a spiritual sequel, I guess. It's sort of a sister film to Camino Skies there, and then the other one is on a beautiful little club in New Zealand called the Coffin Club. Yeah.
Sounds ominous, but it's an uplifting journey through dealing with death. But it's going to be a comedy documentary.
Yeah, lots of great Kiwi characters in it.
Good luck with those projects. If you have tuned into this and you've not yet seen the film, you can watch Camino Skies now on Curzon Home Cinema. Thank you to Parkland for helping us sort this event out. But Fergus and Noel, thank you so much for joining us, and please go back to sleep now.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, everyone.
Take good care of yourselves. Bye bye.
All right.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
We have some events coming up in the living room. Next Friday, the 15th of May, or this Friday, sorry, the 15th of May, is Atom, A Love Affair. That's going to be screening from Friday on Curzon Home Cinema. And that evening at 8:30, Carol Nara will be in conversation with the director of the film, Vicky Leslie, and also the narrator and environmentalist, Lily Cole. It's a film about the pros and cons and the history of nuclear power and the way that attitudes have shifted to it over time. And then next Wednesday, the 20th of May, Love and Friendship is coming back onto Curzon Home Cinema. And I will be in conversation at 8:30 that night on Wednesday, the 20th of May, with its director and its writer, Whit Stillman. If you've not seen it, Love and Friendship is an adaptation of Jane Austen's little-known Lady Susan. And the director of Metropolitan, Barcelona, and The Last Days of Disco has turned it into a fantastic and hilarious satire. And Whit Stillman is a fabulous raconteur, so do tune in for that. One other thing, two new films that have come on to Curzon Home Cinema that are definitely worth seeing. A friend of Curzon, the Romanian director Corneliu Porumboiu, has two new films to watch. One is a fiction film, The Whistlers, which, typical of Corneliu, is a thriller, but not the kind of thriller that you would expect. And also the documentary Infinite Football, which is probably the most original football documentary since Zidane. Definitely wonderful films by the director of Police Adjective and 1208 East of Bucharest. In the meantime, do take care of yourselves, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.